So I've been asked to talk about sustaining volunteer programs globally, and so I am going to take you through basically a journey, start a little bit with the AMD overview, kind of who we are, and a little bit of a timeline about community affairs, which is what we call our program at AMD. Some of our key programs over the years, talk about some of our best practices and a lot of lessons learned along the way. And one of our first key lessons, I think Betty talked about this yesterday with Booz Allen, was to create a t-shirt that was really bright and would really stand out when people wore it all around the world. So there you see the green t-shirts right there, but just like Booz Allen has their red t-shirts, that seemed to be a strategic thing for us in the very beginning because so many of the corporations all had white shirts. So there you go. Anyway, so that was the starting point some years ago. A little bit about AMD at a glance, who we are. Because our products are inside stuff, sometimes people don't really know us. We are a leader in microprocessor and graphics chips. Founded in 1969, Sunnyvale, California headquarters, about 11,000 employees worldwide. There was a time I can recall when we were up to about 16. But that shows you what's happened in the last couple of years in terms of some attrition and, unfortunately, some cost-cutting layoffs that we've had. Annual revenue is about $6.57 billion for 2011, so it gives you a sense of kind of the size and scale of the company. Target markets are in both graphics chips as well as microprocessors, and you'll find our products in desktop computers and game consoles, notebooks, tablets, and servers, those kinds of machines. So very technical workforce. So that's interesting to bring up because we have lots and lots of engineers in our company. In fact, I like to say that engineers are our lifeblood, and we'll talk about STEM learning here in a bit. STEM to me is their oxygen. But I have lived and learned how to really work well with engineers over the last 20 some odd years. So worldwide operations, the slide shows here kind of our overview of our global operations. We're actually in up to 30 communities now. It used to be, we only had 4 outside of the U.S., so it's grown exponentially. And we target our community affairs work in these communities, and we'll talk more about how we do that in a little bit. Moving forward, I will tell you that the BRIC countries are key markets for us, and so we anticipate really increasing our community affairs activity, particularly in Brazil, India, and China, where we have some pretty large concentration of employees already. So we consider community affairs as a very strong pillar, if you will, or contributor to our overall corporate responsibility strategy. Our communities are part, and engagement is part of our core values at the company. It's interesting that AMD was really kind of a Silicon Valley startup, and our original CEO, Jerry Sanders, coined the phrase, people first, products and profits will follow. And that focus on people has expanded over the years to also include our communities, our partners, our schools, and others that we work with. So we take that kind of people term very broadly. But the focus on people and making sure that we were doing right by our employees, right by our communities, has been a steady value of the company for many years and has survived now. We're now on our 4th CEO. I'll talk a little bit more about that. My 4th CEO with the company in 23 years, so including someone who just joined us in this past year. So here's a little bit about our journey and the timeline. We did start in 1980. We initiated a corporate giving program officially, and that was put in place actually by the board of directors, which was pretty significant back then, and I think a little bit early compared to some of the trends. In the 90s, we were really focused a lot on building out our volunteerism programs, and that was also approved as a corporate sanctioned activity. In the early 2000s, we created a Global Community Affairs Council. We established this council to provide oversight over all of our giving and involvement. We then, in about, I skipped over one block. In the mid-90s, we established our grant incentives for volunteer efforts program, which I'll speak to in a little bit. GIVE is what we call it. It is the essentially our Dollars for Doers program, so that was a mid-90s ad. And then in 2008, we decided to step back. We had been investing in science and math learning for years and years because of our engineering focus, and that made sense. But we decided to create a foundation for the company. There had been, interesting enough, a foundation put on the books prior to my arrival, but was never funded. And so it sat there for a number of years, and at one point we just decided with the legal team, well, we probably should just get rid of that. So we took it off the books. But we had another opportunity, and the then gentleman that I was reporting into, who happened to be the head legal counsel for the company, we talked about how we could safeguard, if you would, the future of this activity. Beyond when we're gone, we're not with the company anymore, how can we embed this in the company so that we know it's going to last and it won't be up to a whim of some, some group or some some CEO to say, well, we don't need to do that. Don't think that would happen necessarily culturally, but we still wanted to say, how can we make sure that this lives on? And so we created a foundation. And we spent a lot of time. We knew we wanted to do something around science, math, technology, because of our company and the focus. But again, we'd been funding all kinds of things, and about the same time, microprocessors that we made were really favorites of a lot of the do-it-yourself, build your own system in the garage kind of enthusiast. And about that time, we also acquired a company out of Markham, Canada called ATI. And ATI was really, really excellent at graphics. And so ATI came into our fold. And we said, this is really interesting. We ought to look at this intersection between where gaming and education cross over, not just the science, technology, engineering, and math, but let's look at what's there. And we were pleasantly surprised. The data showed that when kids were playing games, and this is several years ago, right? So games were not even as ubiquitous as they are now. But we looked and said, okay, well, kids playing games, they get some good skills, not the least of maybe dexterity, agility, those kinds of things, quick thinking. And sometimes, parents don't agree with that, and sometimes teachers don't agree with that, but that's true. But what really got us excited is that when you looked at once you start getting kids involved in concepting games, which is similar to concepting and trying to create a movie, if you think it that way, they get much more engaged and their skills go up exponentially. And you actually can once you get kids involved in not only concepting, but creating, developing a game, any kind of game, then they actually are getting STEM skills along with a lot of other 21st century skills. So that got us really, really excited. And that ended up being the primary focus, and I'll come back to that. It's called AMD Changing the Game. That is our signature education initiative of the AMD Foundation. All right, so in terms, back for a minute, just to community affairs in general, we did a refresh just recently on our mission. We have a lean team, like many of you probably have in your companies, and we availed ourselves of their services and said, let's step back again and look at what are we really doing here? Now that we're global and things have changed a lot since we started this back in the 80s, what is it we want to stand for? And so this is what we have in terms of our new stated mission. AMD engages with community partners worldwide by providing grants and technology that support math and science education, and making local investments which enhance the overall quality of life in the communities where we operate. Our employees make a positive, lasting impact in AMD's communities while developing their own skills. So we interjected in there the idea of skill-based learning, and I'll kind of come back to that in a moment as well. Oops, sorry, wrong way. All right, so this is kind of our 6 buckets, if you will, around investment. It's a little bit more than 6. How about 8? Buckets of investment. So we have, straight out investments in grants to specific organizations. We also do in-kind donations like many of you, disaster relief, matching gifts, I'll talk more about micro campaigns in a minute, and then I just mentioned AMD Changing the Game and the foundation there. So that is kind of our investment portfolio. In terms of involvement, we've got some additional new programs in here that we initiated in the last couple of years. The Give piece I've mentioned, again, Dollars for Doers, that's our version of that. Team development grants, I'll touch on those, but that allows people to come together around a cause and go out and do that, and we support it. Volunteer activities, obviously, blood drives, those sorts of things. We did institute some new Global Excellence Awards, which you'll see here also both from a site and an individual point of view. We now give out those awards each year. And we instituted a formal Global Volunteer Month there. We have, for years, had site and volunteer councils on all of our main sites, and that is our primary way of reaching out and working with each of the sites. So building this team, we actually created a bunch of tools to provide to these volunteer councils in the various sites. The first piece is that we give them a formal training package, so we give them some orientation, job descriptions, toolkits on how they can implement each of these programs in their own regions. We have lots of communication that goes on. We have met a couple of times together in some global summits over the years. Unfortunately, because of budget, we have not done that in the last couple of years, but it is high on my list to reinstitute in 2013. I think it's very hard to manage this, and our team does a fabulous job working with them and reaching out to them and having calls at all times of the day and night to make sure that we can connect with our colleagues in the other regions. But it's challenging still, and there's nothing that really replaces what we're doing here the last couple of days, which is face-to-face interaction. So we plan to reinstitute that, even if I have to, move the budget from somewhere else. I'm determined to do that. We have a number of vehicles around communications and recognition, and I'll touch on those as we go forward. So we also rebranded this whole effort as AMD Community Core. And this little photo is just one of my favorites. It's somebody who was, I think we were doing a wildflower planting or something like that. And the idea was that, it's really positive for our employees, but it's also very positive for the community. So this idea that, we can start using this more for skill-based learning as well. Team development grants, I mentioned that a minute ago, but this is one of the new initiatives we brought on board in the last year and a half. So this recognizes teams of employees who volunteer for some local nonprofit or school in their local community. And what we'll do is, if they go volunteer and they raise money themselves or not, we will match that from the corporate budget. Micro campaigns allows sites to come up with a project that they want to do, and again, leverage their money with the corporate money, so we can kind of double that effort and impact. Global Volunteer Month. This is the 2011 Global Volunteer Month. 2011. We had it in October, and we were just thrilled to have so many different teams everywhere. Again, you get kind of the impact of the green shirts and what those will do for you. So it's a real positive thing for us. It's a month-long campaign for us, the Global Volunteer Month, and again, we are very flexible with what the communities can do. We don't try to dictate in any way. They usually stay within the boundaries of either education or some kind of health and welfare program there that they're interested in. We had 500 employees from 16 sites in 6 countries who volunteered. 1,500 hours of volunteer work that went to about 45 different charities over the course of the month. So we were really proud of that. Oops, sorry. I keep wanting to go the other way. I mentioned this a couple of times, but skill-based volunteerism, it's funny, it took us a long time get the attention of our HR team. I don't know how many of you remember the Pillsbury came out years and years and years ago with what I thought was the most amazing model of how you can align volunteerism and skill-based learning together. But I pitched it to our HR team, I think, a couple of times over the next 5 years to different heads of HR, and they just they weren't there yet, put it that way. They're there now, which is great. They have embraced skills-based volunteerism. They see it as a terrific way for people to fill out their development goals that we all have to have. And so it has now arrived at AMD, and I'm thrilled about that. And we've got a lot of people working in different programs, but now getting, not only what they were already getting out of it, which is the experience and the feeling of doing the right thing, but now they can take credit for it on their personal development plans as well, which I think is a real accomplishment given how long it took to get there. But sometimes you have to do that. I've realized that because I've been with the company so long and have worked with many different people, sometimes I just have to wait them out, frankly. Sometimes the people leave and there's a new person and there's a new opportunity. So, I see it as kind of backing up and kind of coming over here and saying, okay, well, and so obviously I just have to have a lot of patience, but it usually works out. Okay, Global Volunteer Excellence Awards, another initiative we added as we did this redo on Community Corps. This is just always amazing to me, and I know some of the folks talked about some of their volunteers yesterday, but I want to talk about this woman on the left. So we give an individual Global Volunteer of the Year, and then we also give a Global Site of the Year. This woman is named Kathy Roach, and she happens to be in the same building I'm in. She's been volunteering every week for more than 13 years. So this is not just a one-year deal. This is the Capital Area Food Bank, and she's logged approximately 2,700 volunteer hours in that process. She actually supervises. She's like a staff person over there. She supervises a team of volunteers who process food for distribution to more than 350 Capital Area Food Bank agencies in the region. She also coordinates our own food drives for the Austin site at AMD. She's done that for the last couple of years. And so we made a charitable donation on her behalf of $1,000 to the Capital Area Food Bank. But the great thing is just who she is and the example that she makes for others within the company. So really terrific person. We had one employee I know last year who was also recognized, and he literally ran a nonprofit on the side. So he was an engineer by day, nonprofit director by night. It was pretty amazing. So I'm always kind of blown away by that, which is nice. Okay, I keep doing that. All right, so here's kind of a scorecard where we are, just so you can see 2011, some of the big numbers. We had close to 12,700 volunteer hours, 253 volunteer events, about 1,534 volunteers. It's about 12% of our employees around the world volunteering. And units of blood, always an important metric. We've been doing blood drives for many, many years on all of our sites, and we actually do capture how many units of blood are going out, which is it's kind of fun. A little morbid, but fun. This is a really new, exciting tool for us. I don't know how many of you know about Your Cause, but we have just implemented this tool to hopefully connect our employees and to really encourage engagement here. So we launched this tool as a pilot in the U.S. and Canada in September. So far we've had about 27% of the eligible employees go on and create a profile. So you can go in and say, here's who I am, here's kind of the volunteer work I like to do, these are the causes I'm supporting. But more than anything, I think because it's social media-like, I think there's a huge opportunity here to tap into bringing people together, kind of crowdsourcing in a way, around various events and people's passions. And so that's really exciting for us. We will launch it to the other sites between mid and late 2012 this year. But the other thing that it has the capacity to do, which I think some of you have already probably discovered, is just quick mobilization in terms of disaster relief. We didn't have it up this year, but there were some really bad wildfires in the Austin area where I live in Texas. Happened to happen on Labor Day. And so within a day, because of the HR team coming together with the legal team and my team and others, and the people who handle all the benefits within the company, we had reached out to every single employee who lived in the affected neighborhoods. And it was, I think, about 96 or so different employees. So we reached them all to see if they were okay, to see if they needed help, and then worked with them. Similarly, we did some programs in Japan. Last year we had a number of employees there, and so we actually put together care kits, if you will, and delivered them to people who were affected and had to leave their homes. So disaster relief is something that we take very seriously, especially when it hits our communities where we have employees. And I'm sure it's the same for all of you. So I talked about the foundation and kind of how and when we created that, but this is the overall kind of look at the vision, mission, and values of the AMD Foundation. So the values that we support here is really respecting our employees, our customers, and our shareholders. We see the vision as changing people's lives for the better, so pretty broad. The way we do that is to make a tangible demonstration of our long-term commitment, which was another reason why I was really hoping to get this in place and get it built up before I ever retire one of these days, so that it would be there, it would be embedded into AMD. It's a source of unexpected contribution funds for us. It's also an opportunity, because we're such a cyclical business, it's an opportunity to kind of smooth out those cycles, if you will, over the years. And it gives us really positive exposure with employees and key stakeholders. So just some other reasons why we went ahead and moved forward on that. Now, I mentioned AMD changing the game. Little did we know several years ago when we landed on that particular spot of getting kids involved in developing games, how much it would be received, how well it would be received, and not just in the U.S., but even globally. So it's been a great journey. We started working with the Games for Change folks in New York City, met a lot of relationships from there, and started investing in platforms that we could find to make games for kids. And then we started working with a number of key folks in the education world to try to see if we could open those doors. And 4 years later, we started with 4 partners on the ground. We were up to about 28, and it's an amazing reception that we're getting for the idea. I think, for one, people are starting to see, even teachers, a lot of teachers are starting to see the value of using games or games-based learning in the classroom and how engaging it is with kids. I think that's the thing that really opens your eyes, is you see a group of kids, working with creating a game, and in our particular case, it has to be a game on a social issue, by the way, because we decided we didn't need another set of first shooter games. So we have plenty of those, but in the process of having to create a game on a social issue, they have to learn that social issue really, really in depth, and that's part of the process. It's very much akin to making a movie. All the steps that have to go through that, all the learning that has to go on through that. So it's really an intense process, but it is so engaging that I can tell you they don't realize what they're learning. They just don't realize they're having to eat their peas and carrots or whatever it is, but they're getting it, which is the key thing. So we have big program. You see here some kids from the Boys and Girls Clubs. We have the program now in 10 Boys and Girls Clubs in the U.S. and Canada, and that group, in fact, I went to one of the recent events, and one of the little boys, who's about the size of this kid in the front, stands up in front of all these adults who were there, and there was the mayor there and some other folks, and city council people, and he made this proclamation. He said, "Listen, don't feel uncomfortable. If you need any help, just ask me." He was about 12. I was like, okay, there you go. It's funny. We've met with Sandra Day O'Connor. Some of you may know that she has a game, right? Our courts, because she got so frustrated after seeing about the the abysmal civics education that our kids get these days, that she created a game and went out and had it professionally developed. It's a fabulous game, R-Courts, if you haven't seen it. So we got to meet with her. I actually got to interview her, which was kind of one of my lifetime achievements, I think. Just fabulous woman, really neat. Here's some of the numbers around changing the game. We've reached in these years, in 4 years, close to 75,000 kids. And we have a Go Big goal of 1 million kids by 2020. So that's our target to try to reach. We do that a lot by investing in game curricula, different types of curricula. Again, there's a lot of online programs out there that are really good. There are also some in-depth. We kind of experimented with a program. There's one in East Austin, which is kind of a low-income area in our town, and it's a charter school. And these kids have been getting 90 minutes on game development and technology since they started in the 6th grade, and now we're up to the 9th grade. So by the time this particular class graduates from high school, I can't wait to see what kind of proteges are going to come out of it, because they've got a lot. And these are kids who, in most cases, had very little touch with technology beforehand, so they are just doing amazing things. We have an annual award every spring for, it's called the Globee Awards, and our employees do the judging of the various games that have been created by kids. So really exciting, very fun, so everybody likes that. We are targeting a lot of teachers, especially teachers like IT teachers, organizations like NIST and those who have broad reach, because oftentimes they have the flexibility to bring this sort of program into the schools. So we're working a lot with teachers and teacher organizations as well. Here's some of the focus where we are with changing the game. Just again, we've had Toronto, we have a program there, Boys and Girls Clubs. Actually, I mentioned we have 10 of those throughout Canada and the U.S. Just lots of different places. I won't go into all of these because there's quite a few. I will tell you one of the other highlights of my year was we took this program to Abu Dhabi. And don't go to Abu Dhabi in July. It's not a good idea. But it was worth the trip and worth the heat. Anyway, Abu Dhabi is an important site for us because one of our big partners is there. And so we had a pilot. We brought some folks in out of Parsons, the new school, which is one of our partners also on the gaming front. And we had them come in and do a train the trainer for teachers there on the ground in Abu Dhabi and these were just teachers who'd never, some of them didn't really play games, right? But train them how to teach their kids game design. And because the tools are so simple, you can do that. So they spent a week with the kids doing that, and I was able to go over there and watch it. It's very interesting because of the culture, right? And one of the things we're going to talk about is culture and how that is a challenge sometimes for the kind of work we do when you're trying to work across the globe. But there was a big controversy over which school to do this in, and we ended up kind of in a charter-like school in Abu Dhabi. And we had the boys on one side and the girls on the other. And it was really interesting, and they couldn't really interact together, but they could be in the same room. And what was really fascinating is that the girls kind of outdid the guys, which was surprising, because you think, games, guys gravitate to games, that sort of thing. We have these, stereotypes in our head. But we are finding that this particular way of learning, which because it's real hands-on, real project-based, it's very appealing to young girls and also to minorities. So that was exciting. Abu Dhabi was really something. This is just some recognition, recent recognition that we received. Like all of you, we like to get recognition, but I don't think that's the main reason we do this. In fact, I know it's not the main reason we do it. But some of these are quite significant, and it helps us with our own internally, with our own executives, as well as getting external exposure for the company. And we use changing the game. We have another initiative we're working on now around engineering education that will actually be launched in June. It's about how engineers, what kind of skill sets engineers really need to be able to innovate and lead in this really interesting global environment we live in. But recognition's always nice. The most recent one we got was this Computer World Honors Laureate deal, which kind of came out of the blue, and that ceremony's in a couple of weeks in DC. Oops. All right, so I think we're winding down. this is a quote from one of our executives that I just like to say. I mean, we all have all of our systems, we have our methods, we have the way we reach out to people, we have tools, we have all of that. But at the end of the day, what it's really about is this. And so I love this quote. He goes, "Our lives are filled with a constant stream of meetings, deliverables, and crises, and sometimes we forget that there are many around us who have to deal with far more immediate a crisis. What to feed their families. To be able to make a difference, even a small one, was very satisfying." And this was one of our, more recent events that he participated in. So I think that's what we want to leave our executives with. That's what we want to leave all of our employees with, and then the others that we deal with. Challenges. Let me touch on these, and then I'll close here in a minute with a video, and then we can just open it up to questions. But there are challenges. So one of the things that we deal with is the fact that our liaisons in each of these sites are volunteers, and they turn over. And so we constantly are kind of refilling positions and retraining people. The full-time workload, I think everybody's workloads are bigger, and the teams have gotten smaller somehow, and it needs to go in the reverse, but that's the reality we live in. So we've had a reduction in our overall global community team, while the requirements for that and the outreach for that group has grown. So it's a challenge. Budgets, cyclical for us, definitely, and so that limits some of the professional development that we could normally do. I like to send folks, most everyone went through the Boston College program in the early days, but I'd like to send them out to make sure that they're getting fresh information and new skills and making new relationships and contacts. Culturally, there is an interesting look at what's culture. What is the definition of charity and volunteerism in different parts of the world. It's not always the same, so you got to make sure you're talking on the same level about the same things. And then our CEO executive leadership transitions, I mentioned that. We have a phenomenal new CEO who started with us in August. As I mentioned, he's the fourth. And he has already kind of reset us on our overall strategy for the company, but also he's done a really deep dive in the AMD values. And he was very emphatic that this value, that the community affairs values stay embedded in that, to continue that legacy. So he's a big champion. I had my public affairs team together. We meet twice a year for about a day and a half and do some in-depth look at where we are with planning. What did we say we were going to do the last 6 months? Where are we with that now? And we asked him to kind of beam in from Sunnyvale because he was out there bright at 6:45 in the morning. He was on the video and he looked like he'd been up for 2 hours and probably had played basketball already because he's big into basketball. But anyway, the reason I say that is he made a comment about our team that was priceless to me. He started talking about what's the value of this group? How does it connect with what I'm trying to do as a strategy for this company? And so kind of where's our value at, if you will. And he said, you all are the keepers of the relationships of trust. You are the ones who are out there building relationships of trust with our partners, with our customers, with education folks, with people all over the world. And that is so critical to our credibility. And you own that, and you all do a great job. So that was just very rewarding. So to know that he sees it in that way, I think gives us huge potential as we move forward. So with that, I think we can roll the video, and then I will say there's two things. I do have one more slide. Sorry about that, John. And that is just that I feel like what we've learned is that if I say anything else, it's really that we cannot, as the corporate office, try to figure out what the other sites are supposed to do. We need to listen to them, and we need to make sure we recognize them, but we need to not try to dictate to them how to get things done because they do it differently. And all we really care about is that they're engaged in the process and they're doing what's right for their own communities. And one of my earlier bosses, who was very wise, said, you cannot think and act globally if you don't get out of the U.S. And I have found that, I'll be sitting there and going, gee, I haven't been out for a while. I probably should try to do that in conjunction with some other things. But just like the experience in Abu Dhabi or wherever you are, you know, you don't really feel it unless you're out there and you see it and you can talk directly to these folks. So that would be my big advice is, you know, don't try to fix it from the corporate office. Let them give you the solutions and work with them, and then be sure you get out there when you can.
Great.
All right?
Ready for the video?
Ready. Let's roll them.
Okay.
Thank you.
AMD, involvement in our communities is a major priority. Not because we have to, not because it's expected of us, but because it's the right thing to do. Whether it's contributing to disaster relief, or supporting education, or lending a hand in the neighborhood. This shared spirit makes us who we are as AMDers, and we officially dedicated that spirit in 2010 with the launch of AMD Community Corps.
Volunteering is a big part of giving back.
It's a different experience.
AMD Community Corps programs are designed to help employees make a positive impact in the community while getting hands-on experience through projects that foster professional growth and leadership skills.
I have gained a lot of program management skills through helping out different events.
We try to link this activity with their career because they see this is a way for them to improve the skill set that they couldn't get at job.
Last year, hundreds of AMD volunteers around the world offered their time and talents to improve the places where they live. Another key component of AMD Community Corps is the AMD Employee Giving Program. AMD will make additional monetary contributions to approved charitable organizations based on the time or money that an employee donates during the calendar year. To enhance the Employee Giving Program, AMD offers AMD Community Corps Connect. This tool allows employees around the world to connect and collaborate with charitable causes and promote volunteerism and involvement within their communities. AMD Changing the Game is another key program that complements AMD Community Corps and our employee giving programs. An initiative of the AMD Foundation, AMD Changing the Game helps disadvantaged youth at the middle and high school levels harness the power of digital games with social content. Through the process of developing these games, participants can learn critical science, technology, engineering, and math skills.
It's a way to inspire kids to learn because they're working on something they love anyway.
AMD's program is changing the game. I have never in my life heard of a title for a program more fitting than Changing the Game.
AMD empowers people to live more productive lives, not just through our products and technologies, but also through the hands-on efforts of our employees in communities around the world.
Let's volunteer together.
Make a difference in other people's lives.
Get involved, volunteer.
So volunteer with AMD. Learn more about AMD Community Corps and our other charitable programs online.